A 13-year-old black boy named Jamal Carter often got lost in thought during class. One day, his teacher, Mrs. Amanda Thompson, called on him unexpectedly. She made him stand up and solve a math problem on the board that was much harder than what they were learning. Some classmates laughed, while others doubted he could do it. But what they didn't know was that Jamal was actually a math genius. It was a sunny autumn day in Atlanta, Georgia, and the classroom at Riverside Middle School was buzzing with noise as students settled in for math class. Jamal sat by the window, quietly staring outside. He wasn't uninterested in math. In fact, he loved numbers and solving problems, but the slow pace of the lessons bored him, so he often daydreamed. His notebook, mostly empty, had advanced equations scribbled in the margins, things he worked on for fun. Mrs. Thompson, a strict and experienced teacher, noticed Jamal wasn't paying attention. She was frustrated because many students had done poorly on the latest math test. She decided to challenge Jamal, not realizing how talented he really was. As Jamal stood at the board, the class watched, some laughing, others skeptical, but Jamal was about to surprise them all. Mrs. Thompson didn't accept average work. Seeing so many low scores on the recent test made her wonder if her students were trying hard enough. She picked up the stack of tests and started calling out names, handing them back with short comments like "good job" to some and "you need to study more" to others. When she got to Jamal's desk, she paused. His test was on top with a big red 100% circled at the top. Jamal had gotten perfect scores before, but his lack of attention in class annoyed her. She handed him the test without saying anything, her lips pressed tightly together as she walked back to the front of the room. "All right, listen up," Mrs. Thompson's voice cut through the noise, and the room went quiet. She placed the stack of tests on her desk and leaned against it, looking at the students. "Most of you did okay, she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't impressed, "but many of you are still struggling with concepts we've been working on for weeks." Jamal, barely listening, rested his chin on his hand and stared out the window. The rustling leaves outside seemed more interesting than Mrs. Thompson's lecture. He didn't notice her sharp eyes turning toward him as she continued. "This is basic algebra," she said, her voice rising slightly. "You need to understand this if you want to do well in high school, college, or life in general." She paused, her gaze fixed on Jamal's distracted face. A flicker of irritation crossed her expression. "Jamal Carter," she snapped, her voice cutting through the silence. Jamal jumped, his hands slipping from his chin as his classmates turned to look at him. His heart raced, and his face turned red. "Yes, ma'am," he mumbled, barely audible. Mrs. Thompson narrowed her eyes. "You seem very interested in what's happening outside," she said, nodding toward the window. "Care to share what's so fascinating?" Jamal opened his mouth to respond but quickly shut it, unsure of what to say. A few students chuckled, but Mrs. Thompson wasn't smiling. "Let's see if you've been paying attention," she said sharply. "Come up here." The room fell silent as Jamal stood up slowly, his chair scraping the floor. His classmates watched with a mix of amusement and curiosity. Some whispered, "She's going to roast him," while others laughed quietly. "He never talks. He doesn't even know what's going on," one student muttered. Jamal's palms were sweaty as he walked to the front of the room. He could feel everyone staring at him, making the walk to the whiteboard feel endless. Mrs. Thompson stood by the board, marker in hand, her expression hard to read. "Let's see how much you've been paying attention," she said, writing a complex equation on the board. It was far more advanced than what the class had covered, but not impossible for someone with Jamal's skills. She stepped back and held the marker out to him. "Go ahead," she said, her tone challenging. "Show us what you've got." Jamal took the marker, the cool plastic pressing into his hand. He stared at the equation, his mind racing. The whispers and quiet laughter behind him only made the pressure worse. His heart pounded, and for a moment, he thought about giving up and walking away. But then he remembered all the hours he'd spent solving problems like this one. This wasn't about Mrs. Thompson or his classmates, it was about him and what he knew he could do. Jamal took a deep breath, raised the marker, and started writing. The classroom seemed to shrink as he stood in front of the whiteboard, the marker feeling heavier with each second. The equation was a mix of variables, exponents, and fractions, something most 8th graders wouldn't see. It was clear Mrs. Thompson had chosen it to test him. Behind him, the class whispered and laughed. "No way he's getting that," one boy muttered. "He doesn't even know where to start," another said, laughing softly. Jamal's shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. Instead, he focused on the board, the problem slowly becoming clearer in his mind. His heart was still racing, but under the nervousness, he felt something new: determination. He knew he could solve this, he just had to focus. At her desk, Mrs. Thompson crossed her arms, watching him with a raised eyebrow. To her, this wasn't just a test of Jamal's math skills, it was a test of his focus. She'd always been annoyed by how he drifted off in class, especially since she could tell he was smart. Now, she wanted to see what he could really do when pushed. "Well," she said, breaking the silence, "we're waiting." Jamal took a deep breath and lifted the marker. At first, his writing was slow and careful, but as he worked through the problem, his hand grew steadier. The class had expected him to freeze or give up, but instead, he kept going. Murmurs spread through the room. "Wait, is he actually solving it?" a girl whispered. "Looks like it," her friend whispered back, leaning forward. Jamal's mind worked fast, breaking the equation into smaller, easier steps. He simplified fractions, isolated variables, and crossed out unnecessary parts. The marker squeaked against the board as he wrote faster now. He wasn't just solving the problem, he was mastering it. The room grew quieter. The whispers stopped. Even the boy who had laughed earlier was now staring, mouth slightly open. Behind Jamal, Mrs. Thompson's expression changed. She had expected him to struggle, maybe even fail, but as she watched, she realized he wasn't just getting it right, he was doing it perfectly. Jamal paused, double-checked his work, then finished with a few final steps. He circled the answer and capped the marker with a soft click. When he turned around, the room was dead silent. Every eye was on him. Even the kids who usually ignored him were staring, some with their mouths open. Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, her heels tapping lightly on the floor. She looked at the board carefully, her finger tracing each step of Jamal's solution. Her lips moved as she checked his work. For a moment, her eyebrows tightened in concentration, but then they relaxed again. Finally, she turned to face him, her expression hard to read, a mix of surprise and something else: respect. "This is correct," she said, her voice quieter than usual. A wave of disbelief spread through the class. A few students started clapping hesitantly, then more joined in. Soon, the whole room was filled with applause. Jamal stood still, unsure of how to react. His face grew warm, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment, it was from something new, something unfamiliar, pride. As the clapping died down, Mrs. Thompson turned to the class. "What you just saw wasn't luck," she said, pointing at the board. "This happens when someone truly understands the subject." Jamal didn't just solve the problem, he broke it down step by step and made it look easy. That's real understanding. Her words filled the room. For the first time, Jamal didn't feel like hiding. Instead, he stood a little taller, his hands resting at his sides. "Jamal," Mrs. Thompson continued, her voice softer now, "if you can do this, why do you always stay so quiet? Why do you sit in the back and never speak up?" Jamal hesitated. He glanced down at his sneakers. He didn't know how to explain it. How could he put into words the fear of standing out, the comfort of staying invisible? After a moment, he shrugged. "I didn't think anyone noticed," he said quietly. Mrs. Thompson's face softened. "Well," she said, "it's time for that to change." The applause still echoed in Jamal's ears as he walked back to his seat. The weight of the moment settled over him like a warm blanket. His classmates, still amazed by what they had just seen, exchanged whispers and glanced at him. Jamal could feel their eyes on him, but this time they weren't full of mockery or indifference, they were filled with curiosity and respect. Mrs. Thompson stood at the front, her hands clasped as if in deep thought. She wasn't a teacher who was easily impressed, but today, Jamal had done more than just solve a tough problem. He had changed her view not just about him, but about students like him, the quiet ones, the ones who often went unnoticed. "Class," she said, raising her voice to quiet the murmurs, "today was a reminder that everyone in this room has potential." Jamal proved that. He didn't just solve a problem, he showed us what focus and understanding look like. Jamal sat at his desk, gripping his notebook. His heart had slowed down, but his mind was still racing. He hadn't planned for this. Solving equations in the margins of his notebook had always been his own little escape, something he did for himself, not for attention. But now, for the first time, people were noticing him, and it felt both exciting and terrifying. A girl sitting in front of him turned around, eyes wide. "How did you do that?" she asked, her voice filled with amazement. Jamal hesitated. I just figured it out," he said quietly. Another student chimed in, "That was crazy. Are you a genius or something?" Jamal's cheeks grew hot. He quickly shook his head. "No, I just like math." The bell rang, marking the end of the period. As students began leaving, several of them stopped to pat Jamal on the back or say, "That was awesome." Jamal nodded awkwardly, holding his notebook tight. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. A part of him wanted to retreat to his usual quiet corner, but another part of him felt something else, a flicker of pride. "Jamal, can you stay for a moment?" Mrs. Thompson called out as the last student left. Jamal took a deep breath. Things were changing, and maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing. Mrs. Thompson leaned against her desk, looking at Jamal with an expression he couldn't quite understand. "Jamal," she said gently, "I owe you an apology." Jamal blinked. Did he hear that right? "An apology?" he asked. She nodded. "I've been teaching for a long time, and I like to think I know my students, but with you," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "I misjudged you. I thought you were quiet because you weren't interested. I assumed you didn't care, but I was wrong. Jamal shifted in his seat, feeling a little uncomfortable. It's okay, he mumbled. No, it's not, Mrs. Thompson said firmly. You have a gift, Jamal, and I don't want to see you hide it. Do you know how rare it is for someone your age to solve a problem like that, to think the way you do? Jamal looked down at his notebook, running his fingers along its worn edges. I don't know, he said quietly. I just like doing it. It makes sense to me. Mrs. Thompson smiled. That's exactly what makes it special. You see things differently, and that's something to be proud of. But here's the thing, you can't keep it to yourself. There are programs, competitions, and advanced classes that could help you learn even more. I'd love to help you find them if you're interested. Jamal's heart started beating faster. The idea of learning more was exciting, but also a little scary. He thought about standing at the board, the way the equation had come together, and how different everything had felt afterward. Could he really do more? Could he be more? I don't know, he admitted. What if I mess up? Mrs. Thompson smiled. Making mistakes is part of learning, but if you never try, you'll never know what you're capable of. That night, Jamal sat at the small kitchen table in his family's home, his notebook open in front of him. His parents listened as he told them everything, the problem, the applause, and Mrs. Thompson's offer. His mother's eyes filled with pride as she reached for his hand. Jamal, we've always known you were special, she said. I'm so happy others are finally seeing it too. His father nodded. This is just the beginning, son. Don't be afraid to show the world what you can do. Jamal spent the rest of the evening staring at the blank page in his notebook. For so long, it had been a place for his private thoughts, problems he solved just for himself, notes no one else ever saw. But now, it felt like something more, a space for possibilities. He picked up his pencil and started to write not just equations, but ideas, goals, and dreams. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of being noticed. He was ready to move forward and see where his talent could take him. The next day, the classroom felt different. Jamal, the quiet kid who used to blend into the background, was now the center of attention. As he walked in, his classmates greeted him with nods, smiles, and even a few high fives. Yo, Jamal, a boy called from the back, that was crazy yesterday. How'd you even do that? Jamal hesitated. His usual instinct was to stay quiet, but now he felt a new sense of pride. I just worked through it, he said, sliding into his usual seat by the window. That wasn't just working through it, a girl added, leaning forward. You made it look easy. You're like a math wizard or something. Jamal's face grew warm. He shrugged. Thanks, he muttered, but his voice was sincere. Even students who had never talked to him before were now curious. Some asked for help with their homework, others just wanted to know more about what he was good at. For the first time, Jamal felt like he wasn't invisible. Mrs. Thompson entered the room, glancing at him with a small smile before starting the lesson. When she called on him to answer a question, her voice was encouraging, not strict. Jamal hesitated for a second, then answered clearly and confidently. The class murmured in quiet awe. Mrs. Thompson nodded in satisfaction. Excellent, she said warmly. That's the kind of thinking we need more of. After class, Mrs. Thompson asked Jamal to stay behind. Jamal, she said, sitting on the edge of her desk, I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about yesterday. You have an incredible talent, and I don't want it to go to waste. Jamal looked down at his notebook. I don't really know what to do with it, he admitted. That's where I can help, Mrs. Thompson said. There's an advanced math program at the district level. It's for students who need more of a challenge. The class meets twice a week after school, and I think you'd be a perfect fit. Jamal's eyes widened. The idea of joining an advanced class was exciting but also intimidating. Do you really think I'd be good enough? He asked. Mrs. Thompson smiled. I don't think I know you are. You've already proven this. This is a chance for you to explore your potential. I even spoke to the program coordinator. They're excited to have you. Jamal thought about the moment he solved the problem, the way the class had looked at him with admiration, and the pride in his parents' eyes. Slowly, he nodded. Okay, he said. I'll do it. The following week, Jamal walked into his first advanced math class. He felt the same nervous excitement he had when standing at the whiteboard. The other students from different schools were chatting in small groups. They looked confident and competitive. As the instructor began the lesson, Jamal quickly realized something: he was in the right place. The problems were challenging, the discussions were fast-paced, and for the first time, he was surrounded by people who loved math just as much as he did. It was an amazing feeling. Back at Riverside Middle, Jamal's reputation as the math kid grew. His classmates came to him for help not just because he was good at math, but because they respected him. The boy who once felt invisible was now part of something bigger. Mrs. Thompson, too, began to look at her students differently. Jamal's journey reminded her that sometimes the quietest students have the most to offer. She started paying more attention to them, encouraging them to step forward in their own ways. One evening, as Jamal sat at the kitchen table working on a difficult problem for his advanced class, his mother walked in. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. I'm so proud of you, Jamal, she said. You've always been special. Now the world is finally starting to see it too. Jamal looked up at her and smiled. Thanks, Mom, he said. He glanced back at his notebook, his pencil hovering over the page. For the first time, he wasn't just solving problems for himself. He was building a future one equation, one opportunity, one step at a time, and he was finally ready to shine. Tell us what you think in the comments below. Did Jamal's talent surprise you? Don't forget to like and subscribe to Black Struggles for more incredible stories.